How you going? In this video, we're going to be talking about 5-6 ways to be more social. Now, here's the big thing. This is what we could call really sort of intermediate to semi-advanced social skills. Now, if you're watching this because you're feeling really nervous about actually making connections, well, the stuff in this video is going to, well, really make your connections from maybe like a bit average or a bit where you really feel like you're not quite heard, or maybe you feel like you're not creating connections with people or friendships, or maybe if you're the kind of person who's going out and you're meeting people but no one really seems to remember you, or you're always sort of like the joker but you're never really creating a deep connection with someone, or if you're going on dates with people and you're a bit worried about actually how to create a connection, well, this is the stuff for you. The stuff that we're going to talk about is directly for you. Now, if you are someone who is too nervous to create that initial connection, or too nervous to really speak your mind, the solution is always very simple. Feel your goddamn emotions. Stop trying to modify the fact that you're nervous and allow yourself to feel those nerves without the name, because that is the only way through it. Because pretty soon after a while, you'll process it, you'll process those nerves, and you will return to being who and what you were meant to be, which is a naturally charismatic person. Some people are like, but I'm so shy. You might be shy, but has there ever been times where you haven't been? You know, I like to think people are both introverted and extroverted simultaneously. Now, if you are already in a really good feeling, like getting out there, let's meet people kind of state, what you're going to find is the stuff that we're going to talk about is stuff that you would do naturally. None of this is manipulation. All of this is really pointing out the deeper truths of human connection. So without further ado, let's get into thing number one, which is... Thing number one is include people in your stories. Now, honestly, there is nothing worse than a person who tells an uncalibrated story. Now, including people in your stories, what that means is being empathetic. Are they listening? Is it a story that they actually like? If you're telling a story to someone, engaging them, trying to get to know them, and expressing yourself to them through a story, there is nothing worse than either droning on too long or telling a story that is either offensive or a bit too sort of not what they're interested in. How you can include someone in your story is by not just telling the story, but asking them questions. So getting them to be involved in the story. That might come in the form of, I went to the shops. You know when you go to the shops and you find some milk and they're like, yeah, I do. Or you might ask them, what's their favorite kind of milk? But because when I went out, I couldn't find that milk. Basically, little questions here and there that invites people to be included in your story stops them from being in a receiving mode. Because if you're telling a long story, you run the risk of putting people into receiving mode where their brain has just stopped the social muscles and has decided, yes, this is a story I should listen to. So it's actually hard for people to switch from receiving to social. It's really easy to switch from one to the other, but if you've told a long story, right, what can happen is you will put them into a mentally receiving mode. I think people call this alpha brain waves. I don't really know the brain science behind it. I just know the emotional states behind it. So what happens is when you don't include inclusive questions and include them in the conversation, what will happen is then you'll put them into that state, and what you've got is a speech, not a social situation. Now, another way to include them in your stories that you tell is honestly realize what level of story you should be telling at the time. Again, there is nothing worse than listening to a huge story at a time where you really want to keep your stories brief. Generally speaking, when you meet someone for the first time, or at the start of a night, or at the start of a conversation, the stories generally tend to be a little bit smaller. When you have established a connection, so even if you've been friends for a long time, that's when the stories can be longer, because you have earned some of their attention span, which comes from earning some of their trust. But generally speaking, if you include a lot of, have you ever been on a roller coaster? Well, my roller coaster went like this. It's you're actually also pre-framing their minds to also receive the story, and you're actually making the story a little bit easier for them to receive. Now, thing number two is invite others to tell stories. Now, some people you're going to meet in life and just out or generally or along your dating life, or maybe even just with friends, are going to be sometimes shy to tell stories. Now, if you're a social person, if you've already gotten past your nerves, which I'm assuming you have in this video, what you want to do is invite them to tell stories. So ask them probing questions. And if they're like, I went to the shops to buy some milk, well, you can say, what kind of milk did you get? How long were you there for? Everyone has a story, and some people might say they're really boring. The other people are so goddamn boring. But if you think that, what happens? You tend to create that. So instead, when you invite them to share their stories, what you're actually doing is, inviting them to open up and share a little bit about who they actually are. Which leads us into the next one, which is... This should be, thing number 3, should be obvious, but again, it's one of these things that people love to hear about, and let's do this in this video. Thing number 3 is, remember fucking details and have callbacks to them. I say this, but a lot of people don't do this. Callback humor and callback stories not only create really dynamic conversations where you're suddenly cross-referencing previous conversations, but they also show that you're goddamn listening. You actually cared enough to remember a story. Isn't that nice? Which thing number 4 is... Thing number 4 is always be first to introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Harvey. I'm so-and-so. I know this person through this thing. Create a connection before nerves set in. Now, so that might be to override your nerves, but also to override their nerves. People get nervous. We want someone else to help us. Help your fellow human out. Introduce yourself. If you're going to an event that's small, introduce yourself to everyone. Shake everyone's hand. Make sure everyone knows who you are, how your relationship is to everyone. Oh, I'm so-and-so's friend. I'm this person. I'm their brother. Whatever it is. But what that does is that bridges the gap for later, because even if there are people that you really feel awkward about, or maybe in a party or an event, there are people that you don't know, if you've met one of those people or even done that thing, it's so much easier to make or establish or re-establish a connection. This means even if you're hanging out with a friend, you're going to a movie, they bump into a friend, introduce yourself. One of those things, if you're like, oh, but they're not my friend, well, how do they become your friend? You introduce yourself and always make that your standard. It's one of the standards that I do. Even if it's a small event, if it's one of those events that has broken out. So what I mean broken out, it's like, where it starts out as one group, then it separates into many various groups. If it's one of those events, just worry about your group. If someone catches your eye contact, wave, give them a wave, stick your hand out. I'm Harvey. I know people through so-and-so. How do you know people? That's enough. Go back to your group. Eye contact is the first wave, and a lot of people are afraid of eye contact. They're like, oh my God, what am I going to have to do next? You just have to say hello. That's it. Not too much. Not even that. What you're doing is you're allowing future connections. The amount of times that even if I go to an event I don't know, I'm constantly saying hello to people. I'm even waving to people who are not even related to the people that I know, or related through any form of 5 degrees of separation, but that creates future connections is profound. So this is the way that you will establish connections easier for later on. So you start now where it's easy, and then later on it's not such a big gap for you to bridge. Because otherwise later on you're like, how do I make the connection? Maybe that's you, maybe that's not, but yeah. So thing number 5 is... Thing number 5 is establish connections with people that you do meet. So this is beyond the hello. Find out a bit about them. Don't be afraid to tell them a story about who you are. It's through stories that we learn. So it's through stories that we learn about each other. Now, when you meeting someone, you don't really have to think about what role they're going to play in your life. But generally speaking, you do know when you meet someone, you will know what role you want them in your life. It's like, is that just a friend for the night? Are they going to be friends of friends? Do you want to see where it goes? Are you looking for something specific? Are they looking for something specific? Having a clear mind, first of all, can really help you see what they're after. If they're just looking for a bit of fun, that is it. If they're looking for a friend, they're looking for a mentor, they're looking for business, whatever it is, you'll be able to see from their body language. If you're clear of mind, it'll be very clearly written on their face. Nothing more clear than human fucking what they're actually thinking. If you're clear of mind, big fucking asterisk, if you're clear of mind. But establishing a connection with someone is establishing a sense of shared knowing each other's space, like who they are and who I am. So this is beyond that initial connection. It's where you probably spend at least 2-3 minutes actually talking to them. Ideally, you'd like at least 10 minutes. 10 minutes is enough to sort of get to know each other. But in this time, right, what makes someone memorable versus not is this next thing. And that really is thing number 6, with my video with amazing lighting, is don't be afraid to express yourself. And now that's easier said than done, right? But let's talk about it. Some people are afraid to express themselves because they're afraid of being judged, or they're afraid of being put out there, or they're being afraid of being rejected, right? Usually when you express yourself, you're the person that is remembered. And I mean that because it's a flow outward inward, you know? Like, have you ever seen a magnificent waterfall that's just flowing out? And it's just amazing. And it's one of those things that just captures your energy versus a little trickle of a stream or something like that, or a puddle. The waterfall captures your attention because it has more energy flowing, has more consciousness poured through it. Just like when your consciousness is pouring out, when you're allowing your consciousness to pour out through conversation, through story, through expressing yourself without fear hindering it, that's the way you become remembered. Because they can feel you. You're more awe-inspiring. You're more captured. Think of it again, like in another metaphor. It's a magnificent painting versus a rock on a platform. The magnificent painting or sculpture has more consciousness, more energy poured into it. So nerves and overthinking things are those things that really overcomplicate it. And as a result, what happens? Your consciousness is stifled, so you become less memorable. But this is why the healing process, feeling it, not modifying it, is the most powerful thing you can do. And that's what we do when we work together. So you will see that. You can apply for your free call now, gethimhooked.com. But generally speaking, it is very fucking profound. The more consciousness you allow out, the more people remember you. They might even know you. They might even like you. They might even want to date you. So these are the things that creates a memorable connection. Everything else is overthinking it. Everything else is overdoing it. Even the stories, right? Things 1 till 5. 6 is allow outwards, right? Things 1 till 5, learn them, then forget them straight away. Because if you're in a connection, or if you're trying to memorize or trying to force yourself to remember something, generally what happens is that we stifle our own way. Because we're not allowing our consciousness to pour out naturally. We're trying to make the river go in a particular way. And what happens when you make the river go? You know, you put rocks to try and direct the current. It's actually slower. So your consciousness is what people need to receive. People want to get to know you. So it's about time you fucking let them. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you did like this video, leave a like, because if you did, then I like you. And make sure to subscribe, because fucking hell, I don't know, you decide. And I'll talk to you soon. And if you haven't already applied for your free call, you can do this now at www.gethimhooked.com. It's not a sales call. It's just my way of connecting with people. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.